Good morning, everybody. Hi. My name is Igor Minar. I'm a tech lead on Angular, and I do many things, responsible for many different things. But I also have this hobby, which is running Angular I/O with a bunch of other people, as well as AngularJS.org. And what I thought would be interesting is to talk about how we built Angular I/O, more specifically, how we made it indexable and searchable and accessible to people. I'm going to cover a lot of ground, so I put a link in my slides. There's going to be lots of links to other documentation, postmortems, and all kinds of fun issues that you get to explore afterwards if you're interested. So don't worry if you miss anything, because you can come back to the slides and find information there. What is Angular I/O? Angular I/O is a main documentation site for Angular. This is where we connect with developers. This is where we cover all of our APIs and tell people how to use Angular. It's a mobile PWA application that is visited by 1.2 million developers every month as of March 2018. And when we started building this application, we really wanted to build it as client-side application first and push the boundaries to see, like, what can you do with the stack we have when you just build a client-side application, including indexing, searchability, and that kind of stuff. So what I'm trying to say is we didn't use server-side rendering. We don't use it at the moment, something we are considering, but all the information I'm going to provide is about client-side rendering and indexability of that. With that, let me give you a little disclaimer. Even though I work at Google, I'm not affiliated with the search team. I don't represent them. And all the information I'm going to provide you is based on my experience and experience of my colleagues on Angular I/O and the public sources that we found along the way. So why SEO? SEO is really about making information that your application already provides accessible to more people. Around the world, there is around about 4 billion people that connect and come online. And when they come online, they usually search for stuff. They search for information. They try to get some answers. And the way they do that is they use different tools, search engines of different kinds, where they type a query, they ask a question, they get a result. You might now wonder, how do these search engines know what to display, what kind of results, how to answer the questions? Well, I'm not an expert on that, but I know an expert. John Mueller gave a talk on how the web is indexed, how the search works, at Angular Connect in 2016. And I watched this talk just recently, and I was surprised that even though it's a 2-year-old talk, it's still very relevant. Almost all the information he provided applies to everything we're doing today. So I greatly suggest that you check it out. But the key takeaway from this talk and everything I learned about accessibility and SEO and making things indexable is that the web is fundamentally based on HTML documents. This is how web started. It was all about static documents through which information was shared. And over time, we started building applications based on these HTML documents. And it's kind of interesting because several years ago, when we started AngularJS, Mishko and I would go to conferences and tell people about, stop thinking about documents. You need to start thinking about applications because that's how you provide good experience. But there are some limits to that. If you go too far in that direction, you might actually be hurting the web and building content that is not accessible to users. So what is important to remember as you're building web applications, you still have to have this HTML document mindset in mind, because that's what makes the application, the information the application provides accessible. And really, this kind of fluid yin-yang between the static HTML documents and web applications is a feature that is specific to web, and we should take advantage of that. So how do we treat crawler to be successful in gathering the information that it needs to answer the questions? Well, most of the search companies will tell you, well, treat the crawler just as a regular user. And that's a good advice, but what does it mean? Well, what I would suggest is focus on building good content and focus on building great user experience. And make it accessible. Make it accessible to people, not just people that use the regular user interface, but also people that use, for example, screen readers. Because in many ways, search engines are using the same kind of capabilities as the screen reader users would. So by making your application accessible to screen readers, you are helping other people connect to your site, but also helping tools understand the content you're providing. So I mentioned in my title that there are going to be 5 key takeaways and 1 secret special thing in the end. So let's dive into that. Number one is think about URLs. And this comes back to the document mindset. URLs are your web API, public API on the web. This is how you expose your information. And you should make sure that every piece of valuable information should have a unique identifier, URL. And this is why it's important when you start a project to think about, what is the information hierarchy, what is the information you're providing, and how could you express it in URLs. And then once you have these URLs, you should cherish them as public API and protect them, because they're important, they contract with the rest of the ecosystem around you. You have several ways to control this public API. You can control it through links, which is how you link between different documents in your application. This aids discovery. This creates relationship between documents that are useful to the users, but also search engines. And the things to avoid is doing imperative navigation or on-click, responding to on-click handlers, because that kind of breaks the web. Whenever you expose new information in your application and don't change the URL, that means that information won't be accessible when the user navigates to that URL. And the crawlers are not going to go around and click around your site to just trigger random JavaScript to render content. The next thing you have at your disposal is robots.txt. This is a way to blacklist certain URLs in your application. I suggest that you use them primarily to exclude staging sites, testing sites, archival sites, things that duplicate your main content that you don't want to be indexed. Use it very carefully, because if you get this wrong, you might drop out of the search index completely from all the crawlers. And one thing that is important when you're building JavaScript application is that you should make sure you're not blocking any of the assets, because the crawlers will need all the assets, not just the public APIs, public URLs, but also any kind of images, any kind of CSS and JavaScript to render the page and then index it. So make sure these are not blocked. And lastly, there is sitemap XML, which is a way for you to say, hey, this is a pool of interesting information that everybody should know about. And crawlers use this as a guidance to know about what kind of URLs out there, what should the crawlers crawl. But it doesn't guarantee indexing. It's really there just to have a safety check and just give guidance to the crawler. I suggest that you at least put all your static URLs and any kind of static routes that don't change into the sitemap. This is the bare minimum you can do to help tools understand your application. And again, URLs are your public API. You should not break them. You should protect them. And you should apply regular deprecation policies as you would with code. For example, when it comes to URLs, it means use redirects to send people to the new destinations. This is how you not break the users. This is how you not break the tools that use it. And remove the old URLs only after you are confident, because you analyze your analytics, that those URLs are not significant source of entry points into your application or into your site. The second thing I want to point out is you should decide on your SEO strategy. People often think that this is about server-side rendering. Should we do it or should we not do it? But the answer is actually quite a little more nuanced. And I would say that you have several options, and there are trade-offs. It depends on how much effort you want to put and how much reward you're looking for. If you don't do anything, if you just hope that things will work, and then you're building JavaScript application, I think you're going to have a hard time. So don't bet on that. However, if you're a small team and want to push things out, and you cannot run servers because you have limited resources, client SEO might be a viable option if you do your analysis properly, understand what the trade-offs. Server-side SEO is possible. We have Angular Universal. You can run your own servers. If you have expertise in running servers, this is an option for you. You will get better results, but again, there is more effort to put in. And lastly, like the amount of options and tweaks you can do, metadata you can provide to different tools, it's almost unlimited. And if you put in the effort, you maybe see rainbows and unicorns in your website. So what are the factors to consider when you're picking your strategy? Know your audience. That should be the first one. Like, if you're building a dashboard for your team, you probably don't care about search engine optimization because it's your internal dashboard. If you're building intranet website or internal website for your corporation, you should consider what is the search habits within your corporation and what kind of search options you have, and look at those and how to integrate with those. You can be running public site that is only partially public because it can contain some sensitive information. Different rules apply there. And lastly, maybe you're just selling lots of bananas, and in that case, just go bananas and have crawlers search everything, and you should really invest in that. I also mentioned that there are many different options when it comes to search engines, and you should understand your user. What are the habits they use? What kind of search engines they use? What are the common tools they use in their workflow? And optimize for that. For example, one thing we learned is that Angular IO, as rendered using just JavaScript, works pretty well on Google and ask.com. But there are other search engines where it doesn't work so well. And this is on us. These are the users that we can't reach with our current strategy. And maybe we should reconsider, like, if you want to reach these users, we need to put in more effort and rethink what we are doing. It all depends on whom we are trying to reach and how many resources you have available. We are a small team. We need to pick our battles. Again, it's all about the resources. You know, small teams, you can do certain things. It's always better to do something than do nothing at all. So if you have a small team, focus on the things that are at your hand, the low-hanging fruit. If you have more people on your team, you can invest more, run your own servers. And if money is not a problem, then go crazy. You know, put in all the optimizations, and you will see the results. Last thing to consider is all of the extra things you might want to do or get out of the search engine optimizations, like preview cards and summary cards. These are often vendor-specific. I'm not going to go into details, but if this is something you're interested in, you should research that topic. The third thing I want to point out is you should understand your tools at your disposal, especially the tools that allow you to understand how the crawlers see your site and also see how users use your site. So in our case on Angular IO, we use Google Search Console to understand the patterns. And through Search Console, we can understand what is the coverage in the index, what is the performance of our site. And we can even detect regressions like this one that happened in January when we started with an experiment and realized, oh, we dropped out of the search results. We should fix that. Sorry about that. Another very valuable tool is understanding how search engines see you. In Search Console, you can preview the site and make sure that it actually renders correctly and all the content is available. It renders. Yoo-hoo! We use Google Analytics to understand the patterns of our users. This allows us to understand, you know, is there growth on the site, or what are the traffic sources in our site? For example, I was surprised to discover that 78% of all of our traffic comes from search, from organic search. And this made me thought, well, maybe we should pay more attention to this search thing, because if this is how users discover Angular and come to a site and learn about APIs, this is a worthy investment. So understand your audience, use the tools to do that. Number 4, if you are going client-side like we did, there are several gotchas and tricks you should be aware of. There's very little information about how this stuff works in different search engines. Google recently published a very interesting article about some of the specification for the bot. This is all public information. One of the things that they disclosed was that the render is based on Chrome 48. This is a pretty old Chrome. Right now we're on 65, I believe. So this is something you need to consider. They also disabled several APIs, service workers, WebSockets, and other things are not available. You need to account for that. And one of the things that I see developers struggle with when it comes to this kind of rendering is they always think that the crawler will just go and click around the website just like regular user would. But think back to the document and URLs and how important those are. In order for this stuff to work, for users to be able to navigate to URL and see the content that was crawled, the crawler has to go and navigate to each URL and do full rendering, index that, throw it away, and go to the next URL. So you don't have just in-page transitions as you would in a client-side application. This is a very important consideration. 3 things you should know about is, since we are dealing with older browsers, probably, Chrome 41, you should use polyfills. I don't think you should, it's a bad practice to use user agent detection. You should feature detect, see what polyfills are necessary, download them conditionally, and be aware of some bugs because these are old browsers. And the reason why you need to do it in this way is because you don't know when these things will change. The team can upgrade the crawler, and also you don't want to hurt your existing users by downloading all the polyfills for everybody, so download them conditionally. In Angular I/O, we have this snippet of code where we use polyfill I/O to actually fetch the polyfills. I left a link in the slides so you can see it if you're interested in that. The next thing to be aware of is how to deal with errors. If you are a server-side developer, you know about HTTP status codes, HTTP 500. This is how you communicate to the crawler, hey, yes, you asked for this URL, something went wrong, please don't index this. On the client side, you don't have this. You don't have status codes. But at the same time, you need to plan for errors that will happen in production. What I suggest is you set up logging that will notify you of these issues, and consider using no-index meta tag. Again, there's a link about how we did it, because that would tell the crawler, hey, something went wrong, do not index this DOM, and the crawler will honor that. If you don't do that, you will learn it the hard way, as we did in December. When an error was introduced, application kept on working for all the evergreen browsers, but on this legacy browser, it stopped. And we didn't know until we noticed a quite significant drop in traffic. And it took us several weeks to go and fix it and actually figure out. There's a full postmortem link at the bottom if you care to see how we figured out what went wrong and how we fixed it. The next thing is 404s. So when the URLs are not found or when the content is not found, again, on the server side, you have HTTP status codes. On client side, you don't have that. Oops. Crawlers will come across broken URLs. You need to account for this. Either users will make typos or the tools will mess up the URLs and will generate links that are invalid. You need to take this into consideration. Use no-index, a meta tag, to tell the crawler, don't index this thing. Watch out for soft 404s. There's documentation about what that means. And make sure you don't make your site in 404s a honeypot for the crawler, like we did. When we would just serve all the 404s that a crawler would come across, and the crawler would happily index it. And because our 404 page has so many links, it was super attractive to everybody, to the crawler. And it would surface this 404 page not found in the search results, and was actually hurting. It was creating a lot of noise for users. They could not find the right results. So we had to go and fix it. There's an issue on how we did it. The last thing I want to point out is, even if you go and have a strategy, do all this work, get good results, the next most important thing to do is make sure you can sustain this. Because things change, your application develops, the environment changes. You need to make sure that your application keeps on working. And the way to do that is through monitoring, logging, and alerting. Monitoring is, you have your tools, you have Search Console or other tools, you have analytics. Look at this data, see what's going on your site. If you try experiments, analyze the impact, and use the data to drive the next decisions. Logging is all about, you don't know what's going on the client side. If errors happen, you should know about it. On the server side, you have the logs. When you're building client-side application, you don't. So set up logging so that you're aware of these issues, and keep track of user agents so that you know if an error is user agent specific. And lastly, alerting. When something goes wrong, you want to know as soon as possible. Search Console gives you alert service through which they tell you, hey, we saw something weird, your certificates are expiring, or there's an increase in 404s, maybe you want to take a look. It's very useful, very actionable. You should subscribe to that and make sure you watch for those emails. I'm also experimenting with alerts on Google Analytics, where I get notifications whenever the traffic patterns changes in a strange way. I don't have a lot of experience with this yet, but I've seen many people use it before. So I'm hoping that this is going to be even a faster way for us to learn about any kind of issues. I covered a lot of ground, so let me quickly summarize. Think about URLs. They are the most important identifier for your content and your public contract with the rest of the web. Pick your strategy. Decide on based on who's your audience, who are the users, what are the patterns, and how many resources you have, what can you afford to do. Get to know your tools. There are lots of tools available at your disposal. Most of them are free. Use them. If you are going client-side, be aware of some of the traps, because if you don't, you are basically relying on the hope strategy, which we know that doesn't work. And 5, sustain your success, because even if you put all the effort in, it's worthless if in a month somebody merges a change that breaks everything. I want to give credits to several people that helped me build Angular.io and go through many of these issues. You will see if you are reading the postmortems, many of them will be mentioned. Pete, George, and Martin are from the Angular team. They helped me maintain the Angular.io and Angular.js. And John Mueller gave lots of really insightful presentations on search engines, how they work, and I learned quite a lot from his public work. So I mentioned that there's a 7th thing that will shock you. So let's get to that. How could we make Angular SEO better? I was thinking about this, and now that we have all this information available to us, I was thinking, well, what if you were able to do something like ng-add at Angular SEO? And that would bring robots, sitemap, basically all the basic stuff into your project. This doesn't exist yet. But now we have all the infrastructure necessary to build this. With Angular v6, with the CLI, all of the advancements we made over the last few months, we're in a position where we can have one command that will put you on the right path just to get the basic stuff done. And I would like your help. If you're interested in this topic, I filed an issue with a description of what we would like to do. Please comment on it, provide feedback, help with pull requests, and let's get this done together. With that, thank you very much.